First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity and for this already third conference about this turning challenges into opportunities. I prefer to talk about opportunities than challenges because Ukraine goes through so many challenges that we have to move the focus to opportunities. The opportunity is that there is a big public support for this European choice of Ukraine. I guess there is now a mobilization of all Ukrainian forces in order to do it in a way that it corresponds with the needs of Ukraine. The European Union has also gone a long way in order to mobilize all structures. As you know, European Union is moving slowly, but then it goes in a systematic way in supporting Ukraine. Every day we are now opening certain projects that are aiming in strengthening the Ukrainian institutional capacity to cope with everything that means the association with the European Union. Yesterday we opened a big project for the government in order to help the government to adopt laws that are in, or draft laws that are compliant with Ukrainian commitments under the association. But not only this was the main component of this contract. This contract contains also a very important communication component. This is one of weak points of Ukrainian outreach to their own population, this communication about the policy. The legitimacy of policy depends very much on how people in the country perceive and support and understand what Ukrainian government intends to do and what is the objective of changes. Changes are never easy. We will have here Minister BILDTT, who knows something about what reforms do mean from the political point of view, but these reforms will only be understood if the goal, objective of it's well shown, explained to Ukrainian citizens, because citizens are the subject of all these changes. And this is something that we have to repeat every day, that the difference between this post-Soviet approach to citizens and the European approach to citizens is that in the post-Soviet approach, this Mayakovsky formula about human being, individual is zero. Only collective counts, and you know who decides about collective will. There are also individuals who decide about collective will and impose about others. In the European approach, this is really concern of every individual to be put in the center of political beings. In order that this very person, very citizen supports the policy, you have to explain to the person what it's all about. This is a very important feature of everything what we now try to do with the government as well with the Ukrainian parliament in line to improve the reforms of explaining the way of reforms to Ukrainians. This will increase this Ukrainian ownership of reforms, because what is the goal of it is the reform of Ukraine. And the European Union is obviously interested in having as a neighbor a country that is sovereign, sustainable, and able to decide about its own future because of his own. For years, Ukraine policy has been driven by a kind of patchwork policy into what other partners do wanted from Ukraine, what Russia wanted from Ukraine, what IMF wanted from Ukraine, what the European Union wanted from Ukraine, and all this multi-vectoral policy did not allow to create a strategy. So this association with the European Union is a way to shape a well-drafted strategy and to move away from short-term policy actions into long-term strategies implemented over time by different institutions. What is needed in order that it happens is to set structures, not to imitate political actions and obligations, including the fight against corruption, because it's something that people really do care about and will measure the result of Ukraine against how successful Ukraine is to eradicate monopolies, oligarchic schemes in running the policy, and systemic corruption in the country. And from result in this field depends very much the level of international assistance to Ukraine. Second, to set long-term economical development and for long-term democratic development of the society. These are the main challenges or opportunities in front of Ukraine, because implementation of all these political lines is a challenge, but it creates an opportunity for Ukraine to make out of Ukraine a well-functioning, stable, sovereign country. Thank you for this time given to me in the beginning. I have to go and to open another EU project for Ukraine, EU for Business, the creation of 15 local centers in Ukraine in order to support small and medium business all over Ukraine in order to increase the capacity of Ukrainian business to cope with the challenge of open market, with the possibilities to install and rapid economical growth in Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Всім дуже дякую. І хоча Ян збіг, дякую також йому, оскільки ми зараз намагаємось надати нового поштовху для імплементації зони вільної торгівлі з Європейським Союзом, відкриваючи офіси тут. От буквально на цьому тижні ми зробили також достатньо піонерську річ. Ми звели наших постачальників, які вже мають єсівські сертифікати, і європейські мережі супермаркетів для того, щоб вони зрозуміли один одного. І насправді, коли реальна розмова починається, з цього починається знову-таки реальна співпраця. Я скажу насправді декілька дуже простих речей, і ми можемо потім обговорити їх в ході нашої дискусії. Я буквально пару днів тому був на міністерському засіданні Ради Європи і, готуючись до нього, прочитав виступ першого генсека Ради Європи. Пана Паріса, унікальна людина, яка була міністром закордонних справ спротиву, французького спротиву. В 50-му році, за 3 роки до своєї смерті, говорячи про виклики, які стоять перед Європою, він говорив майже про те, з чим ми стикаємось зараз. І він назвав насправді одну річ, одну абсолютно ключову річ для європейського проєкту, з якою я згоден на всі 100%. І це солідарність. Зараз всі чують багато дискусій, що насправді є змістом солідарності для Європейського Союзу. Хтось згадує потік біженців, який впливає на це. Хтось згадує можливий Брекзит, хтось згадує наступні вибори в Австрії, хтось відслідковує тенденції і читає опитування громадської думки, хтось вказує на ліві та праві сили. Є нескінченний простір для аналізу. Але насправді для мене Є дуже проста річ. Чому я вважаю, що Європейський Союз є унікальним? Він є унікальним ні через акі комунітер, ні через спільний ринок. Він є унікальним через солідарність, яка базується на цінностях. Ні у кого іншого в світі немає солідарності, яка базується на цінностях. І Європейський Союз вперше, я підкреслюю вперше, у випадку з Україною, у випадку, коли Європейський Союз працює разом з нами і бореться з російською агресією, виявив цю солідарність. Виявив цю солідарність політично. Ми працюємо над тим, щоб ця солідарність розповсюджувалась в інші сфери. Економічну боротьбу з російською пропагандою і, звичайно, санкції – це теж є справжній елемент солідарності. Всі ці роки, займаючись розбудовою наших унікальних зв'язків з Європейським Союзом, я казав, що нам потрібно від Європейського Союзу дві речі. Це солідарність і заангажованість. Тепер ми маємо справжню солідарність. І я сподіваюся, що ця солідарність завжди буде з нами, оскільки без України, як ми її розуміємо, як єдину європейську і демократичну державу, європейського проєкту просто не буде. І всі прекрасно це зараз розуміють. Хтось намагається відсунути цю тезу, хтось намагається цю тезу зараз не порушувати, але це безумовно так. І відповідальні політики в Європі це дуже добре розуміють. Але нам також потрібна заангажованість. Оскільки, як Тетяна тільки що сказала, ми є унікальним випадком в історії євроінтеграції. Ми є країною, яка йде цим шляхом. Ми є суспільством, яке йде цим шляхом в умовах російської агресії. І ми не можемо робити вигляд, що всі ці підходи, які розроблені в рамках східного партнерства, що все так, як прописано в логіці, як ми будемо перебирати європейське законодавство, отримувати допомогу, реалізовувати зону вільної торгівлі, розбудовувати далі нашу державу, проводячи реформи, може здійснюватись таким самим чином, як це здійснювалось, наприклад, в Польщі або в Румунії. Давайте припинимо створювати вигляд, що це саме так. І от саме тому ми намагаємось побудувати унікальні елементи взаємодії з Європейським Союзом. Про це я буду говорити також в понеділок на зустрічі міністрів закордонних справ Європейського Союзу і Східного партнерства. Але те, що ми маємо зробити зараз, це дійсно залучення Європейського Союзу до реформ, оскільки реформи бувають різними. Є різні приклади успішних реформ. Але ми вибрали євроінтеграцію. І наші реформи мають здійснюватись на основі логіки європейської, на основі логіки, так як працює європейська модель. Друге, нам потрібно зробити реалізацію угоди про асоціацію і реалізацію зони вільної торгівлі справжнім успіхом. Третє, нам потрібно цього року, в наступні місяці, дійсно досягти безвізового режиму. І для мене це не тільки технічний процес, що не потрібно ходити з документами до консульств країн-членів ЄС. Це, в принципі, абсолютно символічна річ, коли Європейський Союз виявляє унікальну підтримку до України. І тому всі ці розмови, які іноді ведуться про пакетування якихось країн, чи постановку України в єдиний контекст, це все несенітниця з точки зору, що кожен, хто виконав щось, і це була історія успіху для всієї України, має отримати відповідні переваги. І тут мова йде про безпосередньо реноме і репутацію Європейського Союзу. І третє, з того, що я почав, Це не просто допомога для реформ, яка була і до цього. Це ангажування Європейського Союзу до реформ. І тут я завжди наводжу приклади. Зараз не буду з них починати. Але те, що зроблено, наприклад, з реформою національної поліції за допомогою наших американських і канадських колег, те, що робиться в деяких інших сферах, це реально так, як ми маємо працювати в майбутньому. І знову таки, два простих принципи – солідарність і заангажованість. Незважаючи на виклики, як би ми їх не аналізували для Європейського Союзу, я в тому числі особисто абсолютно переконаний, що великого європейського проєкту, унікального, оскільки це єдиний проєкт, заснований не тільки на інтересах, не тільки на формальних речах, але на цінності, не може бути без України. Оскільки Росія, вона веде війну не тільки проти України, вона насправді веде гібридну війну проти Європейського Союзу, намагаючись послабити Європейський Союз, зіпсувати солідарність, просто мати національні его і в результаті зіпсувати саму логіку, як функціонує Європейський Союз. Росії не вдалося побудувати, як вона вважала, унікальне геополітичне партнерство між Євразійським Союзом і Європейським Союзом. І це ніколи неможливо з такою Україною, як ми маємо зараз, і з таким Європейським Союзом, як ми маємо зараз. Тому це наша спільна мета. І без єдиної, я підкреслюю, саме єдиної європейської і демократичної України європейський проєкт неможливий. І чим швидше всі, я підкреслюю, саме всі європейські політики зрозуміють, що успіх України є також екзистенційно можливим для них, як він важливий для Росії, але з іншої точки зору, з точки зору нашої поразки, тим швидше Європейський Союз зможе розширити простір цінностей і простір солідарності. Дуже дякую.
It's, of course, a huge honor for me to be on the stage with Minister Klimkin and Minister Bildt, but the real honor and pleasure for me today is sitting next to my friend and colleague, Jan TOMBINSKÍ. For the United States, the cardinal principle of our policy towards Ukraine has been solidarity and cooperation with our European allies. And certainly over the past 3 years, I could not have asked for a stronger and more supportive partner than Jan TOMBINSKÍ. Jan was reminding the four of us in the green room just now that literally the first thing that I did after arriving 3 years ago was come to see Jan in his office. One of my very favorite photographs from my 3 years, memorable 3 years, Tatiana, in Ukraine, was when Jan and I went to see Yulia Tymoshenko together for the first time in Kharkiv. And for some reason, it was something about the weather that day. We came out and the photographs the next day in all the newspapers looked like it was a Quentin Tarantino movie. It was the two of us sitting together, and it was a wonderful picture, I thought, of U.S. and European solidarity in supporting democratic forces in Ukraine. The reason for this is simple. The policy of the United States for 25 years, which will not change regardless of what happens in our elections, is to support the vision of a Europe whole, free, and at peace. And that goal cannot be achieved until and unless Ukraine is whole, free, and at peace. Our partnership with our European allies has been critically important. I think at this point today, after what's happened over the past 2.5 years, there can be no question, there is no debate that Ukraine is Europe, that Ukraine's future is as part of the European family. And that is a vision that brought hundreds of thousands of people together on the Maidan through those bitter, cold evenings and the violence that was inflicted in pursuit of a European vision, in pursuit of structures of governance that meet European standards, free of kleptocracy, corruption, founded in European institutions and European values. I will never forget on those evenings the EU flags flying over the Maidan. But just as important to me, Tatiana, you asked about memories, are the EU flags flying today over Mariupol, a city which was invaded by Russian-supported forces and threw off the Russian invaders, and today is pursuing that same united Ukrainian-European future. It's incredibly important that we're meeting today in the aftermath of Jamala's victory in Eurovision, Yoo-hoo, just fantastic message, symbol of Ukraine's diversity, of Ukraine's creativity, and that wonderful, wonderful ability to capture in an emotional way Ukraine's position as part of Europe. My only regret in this regard, for those of you who did not see Minister Bildt's jacket that he was wearing at Eurovision, I'm sorry he doesn't have that with him today. But I have been inspired in particular to see how Ukrainians across this country, in Donbass, in Zakarpatska, in Odessa, have united behind what Jamala represents and what she accomplished. And I think that's an important message as well in the spirit of Minister Klimkin's remarks to our European partners. It gives the whole world a glimpse into what Ukraine is fighting against, a war of aggression unleashed by Russia, violating the most fundamental principles. And Michael, I know I'm running into trouble here on principles. But I think it is a reminder of what Ukraine is fighting for. It's also a reminder of, again, this extraordinary diversity that characterizes Ukraine today and which is so important. These reforms, which Jan talked about, these are part of building a European standard of governance here in the fullest sense of the word, including protection of human rights and protection of human rights of all citizens. And since Ira is here, I'll make the point. Yuri Lutsenko, for me, the new prosecutor general, has offered the most succinct definition of what means in Ukraine. And I won't go into that, but I'll just say Google it if you don't remember what Yuri had to say. In terms of where we go with our European partners, I think one of the things that inspires the United States are the very sacrifices that Ukraine has made in pursuit of this European future. We cannot forget that. Hundreds of people, the Heavenly 100, 10,000 people killed in the war with Russia. Think about that for a minute. 10,000 human beings who have been killed in a war of aggression inflicted by Russia on this country only because Ukraine and the Ukrainian people wanted to make their own future. I think going forward, it's going to be, it remains important that the United States, Europe, remain agreed on our fundamental principles, including the important principle of territorial integrity, reinforcing the principle, as President Obama has said, that you cannot change international borders through force of arms. This is not okay. And the invasion and alleged annexation of Crimea cannot be allowed to stand under no circumstances. And certainly for the United States, we are not going to yield on that principle. Again, no matter what happens in our elections. And perhaps most important, and here I will try to wind up, the idea that only the Ukrainian people get to choose their future. It's not to be decided in Moscow, and it certainly is not to be decided in the Kremlin. It's the Ukrainian people, 45 million Ukrainians, who need to chart their own future. I think one of the many strategic errors that Mr. Putin made regarding Ukraine is in terms of his underestimation of solidarity between all of the G7 and all of our European partners. And I will finish where I started in terms of my enormous pride at the partnership that we have here. Jan is gone, but we've got a number of our other key European ambassadors here. I'm glad Ambassador Weil also arrived, and I think especially for Christoph, Jan, Andres, those of us who have been through, and to answer your question, Tatiana, for those of us who've been here over the whole 3 years, it's sort of a life-changing experience because you see this extraordinary example of a people standing up, making enormous sacrifices in pursuit of values that we all hold in common. And for me, that's the essence of the Ukraine story. So again, thank you, and thank you to Alona and to the Institute for letting me spend a couple of minutes on the stage on this.
Thank you very much, and let me start by saying it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, indeed, on this panel. I have to say it was even more a pleasure to be Saturday evening in Stockholm at the Eurovision finals. It was tense, it was interesting, it was challenging, and it was, of course, jubilant towards the end. That was a competition in music, period, but needless to say, it highlighted again to an enormous audience across the world both the talent of Ukraine and some of the more tragic aspects of history, and I think that was indeed very good. Let me start by saying something about the other part of the story, because we are here to discuss Ukraine and the European Union. So let me start by the state of the European Union, because it's good to know the context. And my argument would be that we are now in a phase of history where the European Union is more needed than ever. That sounds strange, because you read in the newspapers the one crisis after the other. Yes, that's the point. We are in a situation where we face a number of different, very challenging situations. And the only way of dealing with these is to try to do it together. When Sweden entered the European Union, that is by now more than 20 years ago, we had two EU summit meetings every year, two of them. Then when we decided on the Lisbon Treaty some years ago, we changed that. So in the treaties it says there should be 4 summit meetings every year. Well, last year there were 12 summit meetings. And that is not because the prime ministers and presidents love to go to Brussels, nice as that might be. It is simply because there's no way in which we can meet the different challenges on our own. The nation states are too small to deal with the challenges of our time. We've had 3 summits so far this year, heading for a 4th within slightly more than a month. But this does show more needed than ever. There's a good story in the European economy, which is gradually picking up. You haven't heard Jeffrey for Greece for quite some time. You might, but otherwise, it is not it's a problematic case, but it's not an acute crisis. Spain is picking up. Portugal is picking up, Ireland is picking up. It's slight success story, the management of the economy. Refugee, Turkey, terror, very challenging indeed, and dominating the agenda. Digital issues, you don't hear very much about those. Digital single market, privacy shield, TTIP, shaping the framework for the global digital economy of the future, very much on the agenda. And then, of course, the most critical issue that we face, and that is the British referendum, but I skipped that. One of the effects of this is that issues of the neighborhood and enlargement has gone down slightly on the list of priorities in Brussels. Is this a bad or good thing? Well, not necessarily a bad thing, because the framework is in place. In terms of Ukraine, we have the DCFTA, we have the association agreement. There's the remaining issue of sorting out the Dutch consequences, and that will be on the table also for the summit meeting in June. I can see a solution that has fairly limited impact upon the agreement as such, but some maneuvering is clearly necessary. But the framework for the relationship between the EU and Ukraine is in place. It took some time and some trouble, mildly speaking, but it's there. And that means that from our side and from your side, what counts now is implementation, followed by implementation, and followed by implementation. Chapter by chapter, paragraph by paragraph, issue by issue. And be assured that the EU countries, the EU as such, and the EU individual countries, and the US and others, will be there to help as much as we can. But the success of Ukraine is in the hands of Ukraine. We can and we will be supportive within the framework that have been agreed, but it's up to the political environment of Ukraine to move the country forward. I'm impressed by what has been done. I think the Yatsenyuk government is the best government that Ukraine ever had. you might say that that's a fairly low standard. Because this has been, as I've said very many times, probably the worst governed place of the ex-Soviet space in Europe for the last quarter of a century. So there was really room for picking up, and you've picked up at a considerable speed with difficulties, with sacrifice, with a difficult economic situation, but you are on track. And that is appreciated by other countries. Being on track doesn't mean that you are there. And with the new government now there, it's a question both of that government showing its reform determination within the frameworks of the agreements that have been concluded, and then for us to be able to give the support to that determination of that government that we hope will be demonstrated. I'll skip all of the Minsk and Donbass and the other issues. Jeffrey dealt with those, and I agree with everything he said, Crimea as well. Only saying that the fairly obvious thing. The best guarantee for the long-term stability and security of Ukraine rests in the democratic stability of the country and in its economic and political success. Putin miscalculated gravely in 2014 because he was absolutely convinced that Ukraine was going to unravel in the spring and summer of 2014. That did not happen. And although what the EU and US did was, I think, important in impressing things upon the Kremlin, it was the resistance and resilience of Ukraine societies that was decisive. Ukraine is stronger now than it was then, but Ukraine is not yet strong enough for the future. And that is just an urge to continue on the course, implementation, and rest assured that the support of the European Union will be there. A lot of other issues are on the European agenda, as I indicated to you, but the framework is there. Within that framework, our support will be firm and consistent.
I'm an academic, so my license to be diplomatic, and I do apologize in advance. And I'm ready to provide a bit of cold shower and lower the expectations as well. So a bit of reality check where we are. And I really, as someone who is a citizen of 2 EU member states, provide a bit of a background. Because there is a massive irony about the EU. The shortest acronym we can have, the EU-ЄС, versus the complex reality of what are we dealing with. And until and unless we understand, our expectations may be a bit exaggerated, and then it leads mutual misunderstanding. A library could be filled with books trying to understand what the EU is. It's not a state. It's not more than an international organization. And I would say compare the EU to a train. A train of 28 carriages, wagony, with about 10 other states affiliated or attached to the train. And there is no single decision-making authority and no single decision-making process. So academics refer to something which is the expectation-capability gap. It's basically massive expectations and never quite delivered. But the key word, if there is one key word that any official from the EU member states know, is the word of competences. Competences is everything, because as we've heard about norms and values, the EU is about, basically it's a legal union bound by legal norms, which is great, because when it comes to trade and economic issues, we have really some kind of authority. And it means that rules are very, very clear. And if you look at HACCP, basically hygiene regime for any food business in the EU, the rules are very clear, transparent. Then you compare it with the Minsk agreement, and this is where we have a different story. Why? Because the EU has been called in academia and in politics basically a trade superpower and a foreign policy dwarf. So think about the train which comes to basically goes and then stopped at a station and has a summit and defines what its foreign policy is going to be. And no wonder, this is not the way to do foreign policy. So what we have is a delegation to a smaller format. Like, for example, with the Minsk process, we have delegation to Germany and France, which is great, but the EU and its member states are outside its comfort zone. They have been for a long time, but in a way, the so-called Ukrainian crisis exemplifies it only too well. Because the EU, the fundamental challenge for the EU, it has been devised as a post-geopolitical entity, basically to eliminate geopolitics from the European continent. This is great. The problem is that the world doesn't work like that. And in a way, the EU is not quite institutionally ready, hence this delegation to individual member states. When it comes to the short Georgian-Russian war, it was France. When it comes to the Ukraine, the war in the east, it's Germany and France. And the EU is a pacifist power. And as someone in Brussels said, when it comes to dealing with Ukraine and the war, it's almost the position is peace at any price, and as soon as possible. Peace at any price, especially if Ukraine pays the price. Because the EU agenda is full, and I'm afraid I exemplify what's wrong in the EU. As a Polish citizen, and as the British citizen, two countries which have their own problems, but I'm also a migrant. So this is the EU's agenda is full. Come at the station and being in the room with 28 ministers and head of states who have to deal with all the problems inside and outside the EU. So I know many people in Ukraine feel that Ukraine hasn't received enough attention. As an EU watcher, I'm actually amazed how much attention Ukraine is achieving. So the expectation capability gap in Ukraine is perhaps smaller than I expected. And I know it's also in Ukraine, the EU has been saying reforms, change, structure, restructuring, and etc. And it can be very tiring, irritating, and annoying. We're only humans, after all. And I perhaps will use a metaphor from my husband. My husband used to teach psychology. And especially Indian students complain to him. Their parents expect so much. They have to work harder. They're never satisfied. They ask for more. And my husband used to say, there is only one worse thing than parents who do care. Those are parents who do not care. And in a way, they're outside that metaphor of the parent. When it comes to external power, in a way, when the EU stops commenting, when it stops caring, then Ukraine has a problem. And in a way, that problem is exemplified in today's Moldova. Moldova, with all the respects to Moldovans, was just too small and too insignificant, and it was artificially elevated to a success story when things in the country were going very badly. And this is, in a way, an example when the EU did not care enough to pay and make a difference inside the country. So from that point of view, Ukraine is on the horizon, is on the agenda, however big the agenda of the EU is. And the EU officials, they are only humans. They have 2 years in their posts. They don't want problems. They want solutions. And with Ukraine, there are no quick solutions. And I'm especially so there's no perceived contradiction, for example, between implementing the Minsk as proposed by Russia versus promoting long-term integration of Ukraine with the EU. And I'm full of respect to Ukrainian diplomacy in general and to Mr. Klimkin in particular for making sure that in the EU there is understanding that you cannot have peace at the expense of long-term, stability and viability of Ukraine as such. So this is, in a way, I've said enough doom and gloom things about the EU, and I don't expect that things will get any easier any time, not least because where we are with the UK, for example. I don't want to sound apocalyptic, but the Brexit is a big thing for the EU, and the consequences, I would like to minimize them, but for the security implications on the European continent at least, they are going to be massive. Having said that, I hope that business as usual in the EU style will continue, but perhaps what may be unexpected for Ukraine, that the British officials may be very soon starting the association agreement and learning and thinking how to structure the relations with the EU. So Ukraine may be already becoming an unexpected sort of role model. So this is my those are my sobering remarks and on the EU, and in a way to adjust our expectations to make sure that we understand that we are dealing with a sort of an entity with a very short name and yet sort of so very elusive and complex. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Оскільки те, що я хочу казати, буде стосуватися скоріше західної політиці стосовно України, ніж української політиці стосовно Заходу, я перейду на англійську мову. Many things have been said already, and it's difficult now to say something original still. I also think that public administration, economic governance, the implementation of the association agreement, rule of law, and so on are major issues for Ukraine now. But I want to focus here maybe on three, I would say, illusions that in particularly Western Europe and to some degree also Eastern Europe and North America have concerning the most fundamental issue that I think Ukraine is currently facing, namely that of security and state security. They concern the political risk of foreign direct investment in eastern and western, in eastern southern Ukraine, the necessity of a transitory administration, military administration in the currently occupied countries and territories of the Donbas, and the necessity for Ukraine to enter some sort of international security structure. Concerning foreign direct investment, I think much of the association agreement and the whole reform process in Ukraine is about attracting foreign direct investment. I think it is an illusion to think that you can sort of, with public administration reform, better economic governance, better rule of law, compensate for the lack of security and the large political risks that foreign direct investments have in southern and eastern Ukraine, those territories that Russia regards as Novorossiya. I think one has to face this issue, and in the US Congress there's currently a law, as far as I know, that will concern, if it is adopted, particularly Ukraine, and as far as I've noted, there might be a chapter in this new law on Ukraine which will take care of that. But of course the major addressee for such an issue, which has been risen, as you may know, by George Soros in an article in The Guardian in spring 2014, is foreign direct investment, of course, from the European Union in eastern and southern Ukraine. I think one has to solve that somehow, and one cannot simply speak up public administration reform, fight against corruption, economic governance, rule of law, and so on. These things that are all necessary and should be done in Ukraine, they will not solve this issue. The second illusion, I think, that we have, I support the Minsk agreement, obviously, but I think it is an illusion to think that there will be a process in which the Russians are going out and the Ukrainians are coming in. I think that's another big illusion that I see, to count on that this will simply not happen. There's now the discussion about an OSCE police force there. I'm not sure that that's going to be enough. As I see it, only a heavily armed UN mission or another international mission that is well armed will actually solve this issue, if you really want to solve it. And I think the UN might be a better institution for that than the OSCE, because the weight of the OSCE, of Russia and the Russia-allied countries in the OSCE might be too high to make this such an international mission effective. I think one needs to think about it and not to have illusions about the sort of a transition that in which Russia simply goes out and Ukraine comes in again. And the third and maybe most complicated issue and also most fundamental and global issue is what happens in general with countries like Georgia, Ukraine and Moldova. I've published here an article and also in the Western article, and I've made myself some enemies here by saying that Ukraine should not count on becoming soon a NATO member. I think there are many people here who have this illusion, who think that if only we reform our army well enough, if only we'll have a referendum, then NATO will take us. I know the German public, I assume it's similar in Italy, in France, in the Netherlands. We just had the referendum there. I don't think there will be, all of these countries have to agree to a NATO membership. I also don't see that the association agreement can be reinterpreted in a way so as to provide security guarantees for Ukraine. So Ukraine has to think about some alternative security structure. If the current situation does not change, if there is no major change in Moscow, major change of leadership in 2-3 years, I think there will be discussions about alternative security structures. You may have seen my article on that, on the reviving an old Polish project of the interwar period called the Intermarium Междуморья, which would be a security alliance of the East European countries and maybe now including Turkey, in which exactly those countries would form a coalition of the willing that are facing the same problems with Russia in terms of information war, trade war, real war, cyber war, Cold War, and so on. I think it is also an illusion just to think that Ukraine will become a success story remaining in a gray zone between Russia and NATO. I think one has to think about it. Just to leave Russia in this, to leave Ukraine in this buffer zone will not be a long-term solution. And I think the same goes for Georgia. Moldova is a slightly different case because Moldova does not aspire to NATO membership, but it may have the same problems. And maybe I'll stop on that. Thanks.